Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now today I wanted to do a video that I've had kicking around in my head for so long, and I wanted to be the beginning of this kind of short, like few part series where I break down one of my favourite games, why it's one of my favourite games, why I care about it so much, how I've got to this point, and then also how I feel the developers and the decisions that they've been making are not in the best interest of either the game, the franchise, of their business, the players, or anyone else. Why do I want to do this? Mostly because the game, as you've got from the title, is Guild Wars 2. It started off, the franchise started off ages and ages and ages ago. It was really a big part of kind of my time in towards the end of school and into college and arguably even into work. You know, I made an awful lot of friends on there. It was my first introduction to kind of massively multiplayer online gaming. It was a big thing. And so when I'm making criticisms, when I'm kind of picking the game to pieces, the reason why I'm doing it is because I care about this game and because I want it to be better. And at the moment, or at least for the last few years, this game has not been getting better. If anything, it's been getting worse. The quality has been deteriorating and so on and so forth. But anyway, let's get into the actual meat of this, shall we? So Guild Wars 1, I remember when I first came across the announcements for Guild Wars 1 in PC Zone or PC Gamer or one of those PC gaming magazines that I used to buy almost religiously as a kid. And it was at the same time when everyone else was playing World of Warcraft, and I had taken a look at World of Warcraft. I had played it a little bit to one extent or another, either around a friend's house or whatever else. And it was just, World of Warcraft was so simple. It didn't have enough for me. And yet then, coming to Guild Wars 1 and seeing that announcement where they talked about the skill system with kind of the primary and secondary profession system so that you could customize in far more ways than many other games had tried before, where you had the philosophy of the only player characters that you could play were humans, because in this new world with the lack of structure and the lack of kind of groundwork that a new franchise, a new IP would have in regards to kind of providing for their new players, they didn't want you to have to stray outside of your normal kind of realm of perception so that you could take on board everything you were being presented with from that very straightforward, non-alien, familiar viewpoint. You know, the storytelling angle was a really important thing for me, and it was great, and I loved it to bits. And so that announcement really had me eager for it. One of the other things that really stood out was that for an MMO, it was one of these games that really kind of bucked the trend and went very much for the what we now know as the buy to play model, instead of the subscription based model that was so popular at the time. Now, moving into what the game actually was, to begin with, it was a very large open world that wasn't truly open in the terms of a kind of sandbox game, but it was these very large, windy kind of maps that covered an entire continent's worth of landmass. You had different cultures, you had different situations per area, you had a wide variety of different enemies, and you had, more importantly, a story that provided from the very minor details all the way up to grand arcs for both characters and for events. And as a result, there was so much in the game to look forward to in terms of the story and the world. Then moving into the mechanics and that kind of thing, they were maybe somewhat more simple in regards to a kind of almost Diablo-esque point-and-click set of things to begin with, but also at the beginning of the way that the game worked, you didn't have much in the way of AI companions, as you can see on your screen now that I have, and it was all, you had to rely on other players and you had to work with them, communicate with them, and that's how I ended up making an awful lot of friends through the game. Both those that lived very nearby and also those that lived on the other side of the planet. But as a result, the skill system, you had so many skills. Even in just the first campaign that they released for the game, you had so many skills available to you. You had so many combinations between the attribute points that they gave you, the actual skills, the limited number of skills you could put onto your skill bar, and then the skills that you could split between your primary and secondary profession, and how you could make those combinations work as well. But then, kind of progressing on from that, you had the other campaigns come out where they were completely standalone with the same large land masses, with the same expansive stories that had both tiny details and expansive large arcs. And then further on from those, you had the fact, or further on from the fact that they had introduced those as standalones to the universe in and of themselves, they were all interconnected if you owned each campaign individually. And so you could move back and forth between, you could create new combinations with the new professions and new classes, new systems and other things and that like that they were putting in with each new thing. But the thing is, the systems weren't overwhelming. They were all very much kind of cut from the same cloth and all fit together very well. They didn't introduce new systems that were expansive and unnecessary. And so then they unleashed the expansion pack, Eye of the North, this big kind of connective tissue piece that still had a lot of content. It still had a huge number of new characters and interesting stories, both big and small. It had kind of an expansion to the world that we'd not seen before in any of the other standalone campaigns. But then also it was billed as the connective tissue between Guild Wars 1 and the Guild Wars 2 that was going to be announced shortly after that, or as Eye of the North came about. And so then what happened? Well, you had these big announcements about Guild Wars 2 and about the things that they were thinking of putting in the game. And then as time went on and more information became more concrete and became more solidly released, you had Arenanet put out their manifesto trailer where they lambasted to one degree or another in a very kind of discreet way other games. You had a big kind of upsweep in regards to the amount of attention that they were paying to both story and mechanics, and they made a lot of promises, many of which now seem to have fallen through, but we'll get onto that in other videos in the future. But at which point though, then moving kind of more indirectly into the beginning of Guild Wars 2, they had betas, and that's not uncommon for online games that need stress testing. But with the betas that came, the beta weekends that came with Guild Wars 2, you had these interesting events that spanned areas that became both part PvE, part PvP, and there was a suggestion that those would occur in the game as when it was released, and these things would continue to expand and grow. And as a result, there was an awful lot of hype. You had these new systems that weren't maybe as thought requiring as previous systems, but they still allowed for people to think their way around their build, and if it worked, then it worked, and that was all that mattered. You still had what seemed to be this very detailed, story-driven world. You still seemed to have this push for big things and expansive things that looked really, really good to your average player coming in and taking a look at these betas. You had classes that played and felt very nice. And so the beginnings of Guild Wars 2 seemed to be very much in line with what we would expect from the next kind of move forward for this franchise. You know, it felt right, it looked right, it sounded right in the promises that the developers were making. Unfortunately, then we've had several years of kind of moving around within Arenanet, where certain developers have left, things have seemingly been forgotten as a result. You've had a lot of very unsuccessful attempts to do new things, and when they've not worked, it's been a case of ignoring them and moving forward instead of going back and refreshing and fixing things. And so now where do we find ourselves? Well, now we find ourselves in Guild Wars 2 with one expansion already gone, with 3 seasons of their living world updating content gone as well, and we're looking forward to the new expansion, which is Path of Fire. And we've got an awful lot of stuff that is being brought to light as a result. You know, over several years, we've got the failings of the dev team and of the game in and of itself only being made more apparent as they add more of it. And as a result, this is why I felt this was also a good time for me to start making these videos. Simply because we've got so much being kind of rolled into the game and churned up that it's only making these failings more and more apparent. The images that you can see on the screen at the moment, the video that you're watching, is from the recent so-called preview weekend for the Path of Fire PvE content, which was incredibly underwhelming in my opinion in regards to what they actually added in, but also highlighted a lot of issues that are seemingly continually being ignored by the dev team. But anyway, what I want to talk about in this video more so than anything else, apart from just why I'm making these videos and kind of what's led me up to it, is this video is going to be the introduction. I wanted to tell you guys what I want to address in each following video after this one in this series, because I want to approach this, as much as I have many feelings around the game and so on and so forth, the reason why I have these feelings is because I have evidence for them. I have kind of a solid way of taking a look at the game, analysing the way that it works, and seeing if it lives up to either the legacy of the previous games, or what the developers have said that it should do, or anything like that, whether or not the story and the development for characters is any good, and what they're actually doing instead of making it good, what they're attempting to do to make themselves more successful for themselves in their own way. And as a result, the next video that's going to be coming after this one, which is one that I feel very strongly about, but also one that is very easy to pick to pieces, will be the video where I examine the story of Guild Wars 1 versus the story of Guild Wars 2, as well as the methods of storytelling and the big differences between the two games, and where Guild Wars 2 is seemingly letting things down compared to Guild Wars 1. The video following that, I want to touch in on the mechanics, where Guild Wars 1's mechanics I will give an overview of, an analysis of in one way, and then we will use that to then examine Guild Wars 2's mechanics and the introduction of new systems, as well as the broken systems and the lack of review that I've already mentioned, as well as the fact that Guild Wars 2's meta is badly managed, badly handled, and poorly responded to. Then, the video following that, after we have covered story and mechanics, I want to go and examine the intersection between the two, where we look at narrative, where we're looking at the stories, how they impact the player, whether or not we have context for the things that are going on, whether or not we have agency and have a focus on the player within those environments, whether or not there is comparability between our powers and our abilities within the game and those of other NPCs and other creatures throughout the environment, and the utility that we have versus the utility that those in-game creatures do, whether or not there is a reason for it, amongst other things. Then in the one after that, I want to touch in on the management of community, whereby we'll be taking a quick look at the community management and spokespeople that have worked for both Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2, the echo chamber that seems to have developed around Guild Wars 2, making criticism very much like the criticism that I'm going to be making throughout this series fall on deaf ears and be, quite frankly, refused to be listened to, purely because of certain statements and certain attitudes that have been put across by certain spokespeople and members of the development team. Whether the criticisms hold water or not. We're going to be talking about the attitude of innovation over service, which seems to be running through Arenanet, and the way that they handle their game. We're going to be talking about the in-game parts of community management as well, in regards to the player management systems and Skinner boxes, which I've talked about in other videos, as well as the way that they handle their economy, social systems like guilds, and the end game gear and the way that functions within this set of systems. Then, though, it's not enough just for us to examine Guild Wars within its own franchise and draw our various conclusions from it. We need to look outside of it, in which case, in the 6th video in this series, I want to pull up as many other various games from the kind of massively multiplayer space to examine, break down, and then compare directly it with certain things that Guild Wars 2 and the Arenanet developers have been doing within the game, and whether or not they could have learned from or better developed themselves the same way other games have, and whether or not it's too late to apply those things that can be learned from outside of their immediate sphere to apply those to Guild Wars 2 and make those improvements now after they've been kind of lacking for so long. And then in the final video of this series, number 7, I want to take a look at just rounding up all of what we've talked about so far, summarizing it all, and then going through suggestions, making sure that the criticism that I would have done in the last 6 videos or so in the series by that point have proper constructive criticism, suggestions for how to bring things back into line and make it the game that would be the best for everybody, not just the very slanted view of things that has gone on so far. In which case, after that, we'll put an end to it. That'll be the end of the series, and if you guys want to hear more after that, that's where I'll be looking for information from you guys to inform whether or not you want me to do the same analysis on a different game, the same analysis with a different idea, because this is obviously whether or not I feel that it stands up to the franchise and how I can support that opinion, and then how I can, my constructive criticism on the point to those individuals who can make the change. But whether or not you'd like me to go and duck into other games that maybe never got a chance to live up to it, ones that have been ignored over time, and whatever else you guys would be interested in hearing from me on within this kind of area. But that will be in the future, and with these videos, they are somewhat more edit heavy than an awful lot of videos I've done so far. They are very much a chance for me to push and test myself and grow as I examine something that firstly I love very much, secondly have an awful lot of feelings on, and thirdly have picked to pieces and examined ad infinitum because I want to know how this could be improved. And no one seems to be giving this feedback to Arenanet in a way that gains attention, in which case I want to give this a go on my own and see where we get with it. But otherwise, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you're looking forward to this series, or if you're looking forward to the content that may follow, then please drop me a like, share this video, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.